Okay. I'd like to call to order tonight, Tuesday, February 20th, 6 p.m., the Urban Renewal Agency meeting. Yeah. Is the echo over there first? Okay. Tonight we have excused absences of Tyler Miller, Counselor Tyler Miller, and Counselor Jeanette Santiago. Everybody else? Jeanette is on, Tyler is online. Thank you, Tyler. Looking for approval of the agenda.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve the agenda for the Urban Renewal Agency meeting as written.
Agent Holmes makes a motion to approve the agenda. Any seconds?
Second.
Second by Agent Jacobs. Any discussion? All those in favor state by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Public comment. I did want to say, please speak in the microphone. I listened to one the other day and it cut out a lot. And so I think they were not right up on top of their microphone. So let's work on that tonight. Starting with me. Public comment. This is a place on the agenda where the public is invited to speak to council regarding any matter not on the agenda and not scheduled for public hearing. Do we have anybody that'd like to speak tonight? Okay, we have one. Speakers are limited testimony to 5 minutes. We limited to 30 minutes total for public comment. Come on up to state your name and city of residence.
Not on the agenda or on?
Well, if you have anything specific, we're going to talk about compression tonight and kind of compression issues. So I think you can speak during those if you would want, or go now.
Fairly up to you.
Go now. It said we may not be able to answer anything right now, but if we can, we will, and as we will later for sure. All right, thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council, city staff. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. Before I get into a prepared statement, would it be okay to ask 2 questions?
Go ahead.
Who prepared and authored the staff report for tonight's meeting?
I did.
Excellent.
I don't know if you didn't tell me that was good. I did a good job, but just that, just so it was good that I did it, right?
It's helpful to know. And then secondly, who developed the 5 recommendations for council to consider?
That is a team, with Lane, Larry. So.
Okay.
Before we continue, let me just for our audience there, can I get your name and city?
Sorry,
Your role.
it's a little
I missed it.
rushed. We had a structure fire today, so I was a little behind the 8 ball trying to get ready for tonight's meeting. My name is Jeff Pritchard. I'm the fire chief with the Scappoose Fire District. I'm also a resident with the city of Scappoose.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, thank you for the opportunity to be able to speak to you this evening regarding tax increment financing, commonly referred to as urban renewal. As I sit before you in our most formal of attire, I do so excuse me, as a visual reference to the significance and importance of this subject. I'm here before you tonight representing 4 different stakeholder groups, the residents within the city limits of Scappoose, special districts within the city limits of Scappoose, the Scappoose Fire District, then also as a resident who pays taxes in our community. My perspective is unique because most of the government officials who have been advocating for the tax increment financing don't live here and they're not from here. So as a condition of employment, being with the fire district, I have to live here. So that's why we feel that it is so important that I stand before you or sit before you. Scappoose Fire is the only government agency that provides multiple staff 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year inside the city. We provide community risk reduction activities and emergency response to fires, medical, rescue, and other all-hazard emergencies. The only way we can continue to provide the reliable customer service-based responses that is expected of us is to judiciously use the hard-earned tax dollars that the community has entrusted us by voter initiatives. I am calling attention to this subject to you because of our revenue stream and how we are losing revenue from tax increment financing, also known as urban renewal. 2019, during the process, in a public meeting led by the outside consultants, Fire Chief Greisen called out that urban renewal would affect public safety, specifically law enforcement and fire. Consultants explicitly stated that there would be no impact to public safety. As you will hear from me this evening, this is not true, and I will explain in as much detail as I can within my allotted time. One example includes a simple look at the urban renewal district maps. In the adoption plan, specifically, the fire department property was inadvertently left out of the urban renewal district. The water treatment plant and undevelopable property next to ours was left within the boundary. This can be found on pages 8, 17, and 18 in the Scappoose Urban Renewal Plan. What this does is it prevents the fire district from applying for funds from urban renewal to do any improvements on that property. Reason, anything that is not in the urban renewal district boundary cannot receive funds. That's one small example as to an effect that this that this has on public safety. Our second example is based upon a recent article in the South County Spotlight, where one of the members of the city council acknowledged the inadvertent impact to public safety. The February 12 article in the Spotlight, written by Scott Keith, there is a quote from Councilmember Holmes that stated, "If we retain our police department, we cannot achieve 24/7 coverage under the current budget, we will be going out for an operating levy. If urban renewal did not exist, you would likely have the funds necessary to increase salaries and better maintain 24/7 police coverage. Right now, the effective tax rate, also known as adjusted rate for effective districts within the city limits, is $2.94 per thousand. And it should be $3.22 per thousand. This is because of urban renewal. City is also now in compression, which would prevent the city from truly benefiting from a levy for police services. You don't have to take my word for it. Take the county and the document that they are required to publish by law. It's on pages 50 through 53 of the Summary of Assessment and Tax Roll for the 23-24 fiscal year. This document is important because it highlights the inability of the city, or in this case, the government, to not be able to live within its means. This document reflects the decrease in revenue going to the general fund of the city and instead fund projects that the city could not afford under normal circumstances. Every resident within the city is shown the impact of urban renewal on their tax statements. While it is often said that the money only comes from the properties within the boundary area, the actual impact is to everyone in the city. If this were not true, why would the county not be required to explain this in a way in which it has to be shown on everyone's tax statements? The residents do not know is that the impact to public safety is about a 10% hit, and specifically to the Scappoose Fire District. Our effective tax rate within the city went from $1.11 per thousand to $1.01 per thousand. Our third example includes one of the terrible rules that tax increment financing or urban renewal that most do not understand. For existing properties in a boundary, the tax rate freezes. But what most don't realize is when an undeveloped property is developed, all of the tax revenue goes to urban renewal for the entirety of the life of the urban renewal district. What this means for the fire district and the city general fund is that we receive no revenue to scale up for the new demand. Meaning, if a large commercial building requires specific risk mitigating response equipment, the homeowners pay for the impact, not the business. Building code laws, enterprise zone restrictions all prevent the fire district and public safety from requiring such equipment in the building phase. And this is all done in the spirit of economic development. If the businesses require a lot of responses, ambulance or other, the homeowners pay for the needs of the big business. Let me explain. I'm going to get this wrong. The
Candlelight apartment.
Candlelight apartments are within the urban renewal district. In the last 14 months, law enforcement has responded 101 times to those apartments. and the fire district has responded 31 times. This data came from Columbia County 911 District. The newer development and the tax dollars that it generates does not go to the general fund, and it does not go to the fire district. It goes to urban renewal. And again, urban renewal covers facade upgrades of any businesses within the urban renewal district. We can refer to this as beautification in the grant portion of urban renewal. It can fund things like streetlights, sidewalks, and other projects covered under the urban renewal plan. It does not go to public safety. In other words, the impact of the development must be paid by homeowners. This is contrary to what the consultant said in 2019 to Chief Grison. There is no impact to public safety. As a Scappoose City taxpayer, I want my hard-earned dollars that are supposed to fund public safety to stay with public safety. Focus for tonight and the four groups that I'm representing is not to debate urban renewal, but to help you make the right decision to eliminate the Cascade Tissue property from the urban renewal district. Please do not wait and kick the can down the road. Recommendation number 1, which kind of came from an outside party not vested in the community. Make the right leadership decisions that you were elected to do. Staff report that was presented only has one logical decision. Of those 5 options, the one that will be the best decision for the community will be to remove the Cascade Tissue property from the urban renewal district. It's option number 2. Option number 5, in my opinion, would be the best for the city and public safety, but the fire district would advocate for a longer, more deliberate discussion on that, in which we would respectfully be requested to be included. Currently, the city of Scappoose is experiencing tax compression. We are experiencing this for the first time in the history of our community. This occurred because of urban renewal, more specifically, the Cascade Tissue property. Urban renewal pulls money from all of the special districts, fire and 911 as an example, also education, which includes the school district. Most do not realize this. This year, when Cascade Tissue came off the books of the enterprise zone, revenue was so great that when the portion of tax was added to or taken from the $5 per thousand for education and directed into urban renewal, it had to be reclassified as under that $10 per thousand max government tax. That additional amount over $10 caused all of the other general government taxes to be compressed, or in layman's terms, not be able to tax the full amount. I'm pretty sure that if the voters had the option to vote on something like this urban renewal, it would go down in flames, no pun intended. Moving the Cascade Tissue property would not affect the current urban renewal plan as adopted. The Cascade Tissue property was never really accounted to be a part of the plan. Moving it would be a net zero revenue effect. No loss at all to the adopted plan. You will gain by removing this property is more revenue into the general fund to go towards police services. You will take the city out of tax compression, and the community will see more of the taxpayers' hard-earned money that voter initiatives specified for public safety to go back towards emergency services, public safety where it's supposed to be. In closing, I urge you on behalf of the 4 groups I'm representing tonight to listen to the historical voting voices from within the community that did not direct the city to create an urban renewal district. This time I'm more than willing to answer any questions.
I've got a bunch, but probably not right now.
Okay.
You'll hopefully listen to the rest of the presentation, and hopefully some of my questions will be answered by our consultant. Thank you, Jeff. Okay, so now we are looking for approval of the minutes. Any more public comments before I continue? Okay, approval of the minutes, October 16, 2023, Urban Renewal Agency meeting minutes. Looking for approval?
Premier,
Yes, Agent Grayson.
move to approve the minutes as presented.
Move to approve the minutes as presented. Any second?
Second.
Second by Agent Holmes. Any question, discussion? All those in favor state by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, moving on to new business. Number 2, presentation on compression. We have consultant Elaine Howard and Carol as well. Our Ulmer Finance Director will help as well. Go ahead and take it away.
Good evening. I'm Elaine Howard, and I think this first slide shows how I feel when anybody asks me to try to explain compression. I would go like that and say, oh my gosh, it is very difficult to understand. The chief did an excellent job of talking about how it works, but how it, I have been doing urban renewal consulting since 2005. It took me years to figure out what compression meant and then really what effect it had on urban renewal. So I put together this presentation for you. I did have the Columbia County assessor review it to make sure she felt like it adequately explained the issue, and she did. She corrected a couple of typos for me, but other than that, we're good.
And I did invite her, Andrea, to come tonight, and she had intended to come, but she got ill. And so she just could not come. She said she'd be glad to come back another night, so.
So why is there compression? Compression is a result of Measure 50 setting limits on taxes. And it's setting a maximum assessed value that was set in 1997. And the maximum assessed value was set as the real market value of a property in 1995 less 10%. So that was a result of Measure 50 establishing these two caps on the amount of permanent rate taxes that can be levied. There's a $10 per thousand general government tax limitation and a $5 per thousand education tax limitation. These limitations are on real market value of properties, not assessed value. As I think my next slide, make sure I don't double
Go back.
repeat things. Yes, next slide.
Okay, I got it.
So what is the difference between real market value, maximum assessed value, and assessed value? When you get your property tax bill, all three of those are on your property tax bill. And I don't think anyone probably, other than people who run districts or run a city, know what those mean. So they are indicated on your property tax bill. Real market value, or RMV or RV, is the value at which you could sell your property at the time the assessor looked at that property for its value. So if my property would sell at $200,000, that would be what my real market value. You're not taxed on your real market value. That's unless there's confluence of assessed value and real market value. But typically, you're not taxed on your real market value. Maximum assessed value, or MAV, is the value of your property given the MAV established in 1997 and inflated by 3% each year. 3% is that limitation that was established with Measure 50 that said that's the total amount of increase of assessed value that can happen on a property unless you do major improvements or there's new construction. Assessed value, or AV, is the value on which you pay your property taxes, and it is the lower of real market value or maximum assessed value. So a lot of times people will call me after they get their property tax bill and they'll say, Elaine, my taxes went up by way more than 3% last year. And I say, okay, get out your bill, let's look at it. And I say, are you looking at real market value or are you looking at assessed value? And they're always looking at real market value. And that does throw people off because they'll look at that and it will be surprising and sometimes shocking if it's in a really good economic environment. Right? And what impact does urban renewal have on compression? So urban renewal is classified in the general government category. So the reason that happened was there was a lawsuit by Shiloh Inns against the city of Portland and the Portland Development Commission after Measure 50 passed. And they said that they thought urban renewal had to be within one of those two categories, either general government or education. It couldn't be outside of those categories. And the court system agreed with them. And As a result of that, the court system, along with input from the assessors and the Department of Revenue, determined that when you had an urban renewal area, the values from that aren't judged by this general government 10, education 5. Values go into that general government category. So the tax rates in that category change, sometimes causing those tax rates to go over that $10 per thousand. Fine?
There's a couple of things.
Yeah.
This kind of just explains.
In your area, that red shows, and this isn't by scale, but it just shows that when Cascade Tissues came on the tax roll after the enterprise exemption expired, some of that $5 per thousand tax rate came out of education, so that's shown in red, and got moved over to general government. So the general government tax rate went up a little bit, education tax rate went down a little bit. And that was a result of that value of Cascade Tissue coming on tax roll and it being classified as urban renewal. So removing its portion from the education category and putting all of it into general government category.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Elaine, do you mind explaining how education is supplemented during urban renewal in terms of replenished in a way by the
Sure.
state or the government?
Sure.
Thank
So when an urban renewal area is formed and we do projections on impacts on the different taxing districts, we always talk about the impacts on education as a little different because the impacts on the city or the county or the fire district are direct. They lose that money of that increased assessed value. The impacts on education are indirect because the education service districts and the local school district are funded through the state school fund. That state school fund is funded through a variety of sources, including permanent rate property taxes. The amount of money that comes to our local schools is determined by the legislature on a per pupil basis. And that per pupil basis is then multiplied by the number of students in the schools. And that's how much money you get, whether or not you have urban renewal in your community, whether or not Portland has it, or Redmond has it, or Grants Pass has it. What happens is that state school fund receives less money from permanent rate property taxes, but they're able to access other funding sources to, it's called backfill that, to equal that per pupil amount. There is the philosophical question of, if urban renewal didn't exist, would we have more per pupil funding? Because we'd have this potential excess money. And we can't really answer that question because that's a political question. The legislature establishes that per pupil ratio every 2 years. Whether or not they would allocate all that money and still keep the money that they bring in from the other sources into that pot, none of us really know the answer to that. So we can suppose, but that supposing isn't based on any fact. So all we can say is this is what happens now, and it's an indirect impact on schools.
Thank you.
Slide. So why is it important at these categories?
Can I let Chief Pritchard ask one question? If you can, into a microphone.
To go
Okay.
through the whole presentation before I'm interrupted.
There's only
Are
2
you
slides.
guys fine?
That's fine.
So why is this important? The difference in assessed values and real market values are if they're slight. In some cities, they're not slight at all. There's a big difference between market value and assessed value. But if they're slight and you are moving value from education categories to the general government category, it can cause compression because it causes those lines to intersect. Local option levies are compressed first. So if there is compression, the impact is on fire district local option levy first and the Columbia 911 local option levy So any money that has to be made up through compression impacts those levies first. And if there isn't enough money gained from those levies, then there is an impact on the permanent rate levies. So within, I had sent you a memo. It's been a couple months ago, but it's probably in your packet. And it does say what the impact on the permanent rate compression is. And for the city of Scappoose, it was 0. For some of the other taxing districts on their permanent rate, there was an impact on compression. So it differs by different taxing jurisdictions. But in fiscal year 23-24, the impact of compression on the city was actually 0. For the impact on fire districts, permanent rate compression was $2. Their impact was due to the local option compression. So that is true. Compression is first on local option levies, and that makes it hard on those districts who are expecting to get extra money from that local option levy because they lose that money through the compression valuation.
Mr.
Yeah,
Mayor,
Jacob.
thank you. So just trying to, point of clarification. So when we're saying that fire district's levy has actually been impacted as a result of this compression. So, and I'm just making up numbers. So $1, let's say $1. So if they got $100 and $1 they didn't get came back to the general fund. So they had to kind of pay the government. I'm just trying to understand how the flow of the money goes.
For the for the fire district, the impact was $11,059.
Negative. They still made money.
They still made money. They lost that amount of money. So out of the amount of money that they received for the local option levy, they lost $11,059. That amount of money helped pay for the urban renewal portion because of that Cascade tissue property. Cascade tissue property is what has caused this compression.
Sit with that.
So here's a couple of examples of how you figure compression, just to help understand what it is. So in this example, the assessed value of this house is $190,000. That's the value they're paying taxes on. And the real market value is $200,000. Their general government taxes limit is $12.50 of 1,000 of, should be real market value. Sure. Anyway, Andrea checked my numbers, so I think the numbers are right. So $2,375, and the education taxes limit is $902. Let's see.
You still have a question, Agent
The
Miller?
limits are down below. The limits are the $10 per thousand of RMV is $2,000, and the $5 per thousand of real market value limit is $1,000. So that compression on this property is the difference between the totals of those amounts. So the M5 loss is $375 because it's taken off any local option levy first before any general government levy rates are impacted. So the taxes on this property, let's say, are $12.50 per $1,000 of assessed value. That's the first number. And the taxes on education were $4.75 per $1,000 of AV. So that's what the taxes were, but would have been, but the limits are less than that. So this property doesn't pay that full amount of taxes. So $375 from this property are lost to compression. Next slide. So on this one, assessed value is 190,000 again, but the real market value is 250,000. So it's $50,000 more than the other property. So again, the taxes are the same because it's figured on the assessed value, but the tax limits are higher because it's figured on the 250,000 of the real market value instead of 200,000. So this property isn't in compression, and the full amount of taxes that are paid on this property will get distributed to everybody at all the taxing districts. Compression is analyzed by the assessor on a property by property basis, so it's very complicated. Every single property in the city is analyzed for compression. So these are just two kinds of examples to show you one that would cause compression and one that wouldn't cause compression.
And then, Elaine, then after everything was said and done, these numbers here is what the compression was for the last year, with 911 losing out 45,000 and the fire district losing out 11,000. If when you add them all together, every house, everything, that's the compression that we see.
Well, that was for the local option. There was some compression in the permanent rate property tax category too. Slide. So how to reduce compression under existing laws? So the only way to reduce compression on taxes is to reduce the taxes so they're under the $10 and $5 limits. We don't see anybody out there reducing their taxes. So that, that's an imaginary option. That isn't going to happen. If real market values increase, then compression doesn't occur because the limits are based on those real market values. So I'm working with the city of Wilsonville, and I've been working with them for the last 5 years because their school district is in compression. And they have asked the city to keep urban renewal alive because it is helping them deal with compression because it moves property value out of education into general government. So where it hurts some districts, it helps other districts. So school districts who have local option levies or school districts who have tax issues with compression are helped by compression from urban renewal because it reduces that overall tax rate for them. So increasing real market, in Wilsonville, what's been happening is those real market values are increasing, and that is reducing compression organically. So it is making that difference for them. The effective use of urban renewal should increase real market values in your community. If you're using urban renewal the way it's intended to be used, it's improving your community overall and should improve the real market values within your community because there are more places to shop, there are more places to be able to build because you're putting in infrastructure, there are improved streets or whatever you spend that urban renewal money on. It's supposed to have this effect of causing values to go up, not only in an urban renewal area, but in your city overall because of the benefits of having an improved downtown area, urban core area, suburban core area. That, I think, is the end of the presentation.
Yes.
So the one question I have then too, though, besides compression on like a local option levy, because of the urban renewal, that kind of capped the amount of tax on that date. And so the increase is what goes into the urban renewal. I mean, the monies that go into urban renewal and go away from the fire or the library,
That's correct.
they're not getting the 3% increase every year.
That's correct.
That is the money that goes into the urban renewal.
However, in your urban renewal area, you didn't have compression until the Cascade Tissue property on the tax roll. So it is that property that has caused that impact on local option levies and caused other entities to have compression. If there were another huge development like that in the urban renewal area, that might also cause compression. But right now, we do know that it was the Cascade Tissue property coming off the enterprise exemption that has caused this compression.
Are we ready for one question?
I hope so.
Let's go, Jeff. If you could get to a microphone though, so Tyler can hear you. Do you know off the top of your head, what is your local option levy amount? Roughly. Just
It's about 75 cents.
go ahead.
The question is a clarification. When you talk about education and the funding for schools, if I understand the law correctly, it does not include higher education. It only includes elementary, grade school, high school. So when there are taxes for community colleges, which we have one in our community now, and people are paying taxes for that, that does not get, those funds do not get supplanted by the state to the community colleges. Is that correct?
It's a great question, but it's not entirely correct.
Okay.
The state school fund covers K through and education service districts. There's a similar fund called the Community College Fund, something like that. That's not the exact name. And it is also funded from a fund like that on the amount of classes that are taken at the community college. So it is also, and it took me a long time to figure that out too.
I'm still learning.
So it is also then an indirect funding to them. Urban Renewal doesn't reduce, as long as they keep having students taking classes, their amounts aren't going to get reduced. And we don't pay taxes for our universities, U of O or SHU, so those aren't.
We do for the community college.
We do,
Okay.
but it has that separate fund.
Okay. Thank you.
Question I have too, just for my knowledge, if you're at 75 cents per thousand,
Should just stay.
and so based on the assessed value of this year's assessed values, they get 75 cents per thousand of today's assess, not capped when the urban renewal went in. Is that,
Correct.
so their amount doesn't go up? It stays the same for the last 4 or 5 years?
Local option goes up.
Okay,
Right.
okay.
The
It's based on today's assessed value.
and again, we're talking about properties that are within the boundary of the urban renewal district.
Okay,
Is what's affected.
okay.
But in order for the Scappoose Fire District to be successful, we take our permanent tax rate and the levy, we're at $3.10 a thousand. So it's, for us, that's a significant hit when we're looking at, replacing rolling stock, trying to do brick and mortar projects, and then keep that 24/7 staff on the road. We have those multiple ambulance calls, which today we had 2 medical calls at the exact same time as we had a structure fire.
Thank you. Agent Miller?
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, I just have a few questions and some clarifications here. When we were talking about the $10 per thousand general government and $5 per thousand for schools, it was noted that that is calculated through the RMV, real market value. However, a statement was made shortly thereafter that we're not taxed on real market value. So I'm just trying to understand the difference there, how the limits are used, our RMV is used for the limits, but we're not taxed on that.
Were you able to see the presentation?
Yeah, I was.
Okay, so we're going to go back to that because what you do is you take your tax rate and you multiply it times your assessed value. And that gets you your taxes. But then you have to apply the limitation, that $10 per thousand general government, $5 per thousand education, and make sure that those amount of taxes does not exceed the limitation. And if it exceeds the limitation, then that is called compression, and that amount of money is not collected.
So you could be
Okay.
at 12.5 per thousand or 15, as long as the real market value was really high, then you don't hit that limit.
In this case, your tax rate isn't that high. It's just that your real market values are that low.
And that's
Okay.
just within the city limits too, because I've seen them outside of city limits seem to be quite a bit difference.
And they have a different tax rate. So on this, if you look at the very first two numbers in the second column, this is saying a tax rate of $12.50 per thousand of assessed value would be $2,375. And then the education taxes, $475 per $1,000. So that's $902. So a total of about $3,200. Or, well, $3,375, I think is about. Anyway, the limits then are applied to that amount of taxes. So your limits are the $2,000 and the $1,000. You can't pay more than that by because of Measure 50. So when you apply those limits to the amount of taxes that you might have to pay, this property doesn't have to pay all of that because it exceeds the amount of taxes exceeds the amount of real market value. So back when we talked about what's the difference between real market value and assessed value, the answer was you pay taxes on the lower of these two figures. You either pay taxes, whichever is lower, the $10 per thousand of real market value, $5 per thousand real market value, education and general government, or what your assessed value is.
It's really
It's
confusing.
very
I've
confusing.
been working on this for 3 months and that's.
And if you're right outside of city limits, does county have compression? Is there other, there's not, it's within the city, and then if you're overlooking St. Helens, their city compresses, but like for our fire or our library, which is basically a bigger district, some stuff outside of the city limits. Again, they're taxed on their assessed value, so the compression may not affect. Yeah. There's a lot here and we only have about 15 minutes. And so what is important to us? What do we need to find out? Obviously, any decision today, I think more than anything, I'd like to have more questions come up that we'd like to figure out because I do want to know more about this and see where we can help. I have heard, honestly, a lot of people within our city wonder why or what this urban renewal is really doing. But then I see it a lot of other places, Hood River, 3 or 4 of them. I hear great stories. So I really want to know how it would help us. What do we need to do to benefit Scappoose the best? And I think so. I think more questions are going to probably come up than answers
We
tonight.
schedule more meetings then, or so
I'm willing to listen to what everybody says. I think these are options that are good to look at, but to do any of them right now without me knowing how this affects the whole big picture, it's hard. I don't want to make that decision without really looking at all of our options.
And I think sometimes, especially on the slideshow on compression, it may take you looking back at, I also sent you a handout on compression.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It may take looking back at the PowerPoint and reading the handout again a couple times for you to really understand what it is and what it means.
and I can send you all these slides.
I think our deadline, obviously, for our budget for urban renewal is May. So I would really like to have something figured out at least for this year before May, obviously. Agent Miller, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. I still have a couple more questions and a clarification also. So I just want to be specific for the record too. When we were talking about the fire district losing a little over $11,000, what time period was that for? I didn't hear a time period. I'm taking some notes here.
That was last fiscal year. Or this.
Okay, so
The taxes they got from the November tax bills.
so is
Per
that
year.
22-23 fiscal year?
Yeah, 22, 23.
Okay, thank you. And then there was a comment also about the option levies being reduced by $375. Was that per option levy? So was that $375 for, it's Jeff, I see your head shaking there. That was total?
So there were a couple of things that referred to something in a number like 375. My examples are just examples. They aren't real life.
Mhm.
They're
Okay,
just trying
this
to
was-
show what
That
if to help explain what compression is.
Okay, got it. The other thing that I'm wondering too is the comment was made that using urban renewal appropriately can then basically cause more tax revenue, and it's supposed to bring more money into the taxing districts. But I'm wondering if there is a difference in between the size of communities and the benefit received. So, we don't see a lot of money relative. We don't see a lot of money coming into the urban renewal because, we're smaller. So I'm wondering it would seem like the bigger communities maybe receive more benefit from urban renewal than smaller. Is that making sense?
I think that's a great question. I work with communities all over Oregon. So I work in Tillamook and Astoria, which aren't, are relatively your size communities, and guys are about 8,000 something now. They have done some amazing things with urban renewal in their communities that have really improved the community by being able to invest in buildings. And in Tillamook, there are a number of different buildings that they invested in their downtown. The Pelican Brewery was one of their projects. There's a Festival Street that was one of their projects. So they've done a lot of investment. May I finish first?
That was his hand.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, it just got me
Yeah.
off track. So I'll stop there and you go ahead.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Would it be safe to say that if you were to compare Scappoose and say Tillamook and Astoria, while the population may be similar in size, you're talking about a tourist-based economy as opposed to bedroom community, which is what Scappoose is.
Mhm.
I think that's a fair observation. I don't think Tillamook, I think Tillamook and Astoria are a lot different in terms of Tillamook gets a lot of drive-through traffic, stopping at the cheese factory. Yeah, but they don't get that. Or Astoria, people come to the Liberty Theater and they go to all the restaurants and everything. So I think it is different. There are a lot of small towns your size in Oregon who effectively use urban renewal.
Agent Jacobs?
Yes. So I've had time to go through this material and also time to think through the urban renewal, and I've watched how it came into life for Scappoose over the years. So quite honestly, where I stand right now with respect to urban renewal, I ultimately would like to have a discussion. It doesn't mean we need to have it today, but when you talk, Mr. Mayor, about wanting to fully understand what our options are, currently right now where my position stands is I want a conversation on removing it because we're not using it. And it's hindering us from a tax basis, from a revenue basis on what we can be doing better in our own town. However, what I do understand and what needs to be done tonight for budget is that we have 5 options and they're looking for a direction. And I think, in my opinion, I believe that it would be in our best interest to discuss removing Cascade Tissue out for now, so we can make that immediate change. And then I think shortly thereafter, we need to come back to the table and we need to talk about if urban renewal is really something that our community needs to benefit from, it can benefit from. Because it's been in place for a couple years now. There's nothing going on.
Yes. Larry?
You may be correct. Your predecessors took a lot of time to develop the urban renewal plan. A lot of community input, a lot of taxing districts had input into that. This is something that a lot of people worked hard to get doing. Yes, you've not done much in 2 years. You never do. It takes time. It takes time to build up the money. This is the first year you got any money at all of any significant value to try to do something with. And so the first year you get something in, don't throw it away. Got some money coming this year. The fire district is out $11,000. What's your total budget?
Our budget is just shy of 10 million.
Okay, 10, oh my goodness.
What's your budget?
I actually don't know. What I'm getting at was 10 million, and didn't the city come forward and help you purchase a new ambulance?
Actually, the revenue that we received from the city was from COVID dollars, not from general fund dollars, not from urban renewal dollars.
And that makes a difference?
Absolutely, because those dollars had to be vetted by the city's attorney in order to be used to purchase an ambulance, which is
So you did it
exactly
legally.
what those funds were.
Well,
for.
legally, you were able to help them buy a new fire truck, a new ambulance. And I like that. That is a good community working together, and I appreciate that. Them being down 11,000 compared to the urban renewal getting $500,000 in revenue for this year is not comparable. You've got a chance now with this money coming in to do something like you're saying, when am I going to do something? Well, after we get some dollars in, you can do a lot. And it takes time for it to get moving. You can use that to do a lot of infrastructure work, improving the water system, which is extremely important to the fire district. And it's what you're going to have to get done in order to promote development, especially any development, industrial type. You've got to have the infrastructure to do that. That's what the Urban Renewal Program was created for. Now you have the chance to use it. And I'd encourage you not to change it. Let it go on and develop the way it should, the way you intended it to do, and do good things for your community.
Yes, go ahead, Agent Grayson.
For sake of argument, interim city manager Lehman, the amount of people that are sitting up here who participated in initiating the urban renewal is one, and that's me, and the other one is Councilor Miller online. So I think that there's a lot of unknowns that sit up here on the dais, and I think that you come with a lot of institutional knowledge, not only about Scappoose, but about urban renewal. I definitely respect Chief Pritchard and his viewpoint. I think that this is a tricky conversation. We had a tricky conversation when we initiated urban renewal to begin with. So in my opinion, I wholeheartedly agree with Councillor Holmes in the fact that I would like to go with number 2 as the option, removing the Cascade Tissue property from the urban renewal boundary. However, I don't think that option 5, being quick to disassemble the urban renewal, is something that we need to rush into. I think it's gonna require a lot of education and meetings about the impact long-term and short-term, not only to the city and the infrastructure that we're supporting in our public works department specifically with these dollars, but what that long and short-term fiscal impacts look for our special districts, looking line by line for all of these. It's on page 9 in our council packet, the compression that's noted in these, but I understand your passion and I feel it as well, but I also empathize with those that are hesitant to continue on a road that doesn't seem like it's a very successful one. But I think that it requires further conversation. So at this point in time, I would like to move forward with option 2. And since this is my last meeting, I don't really get to participate in those conversations moving forward, but I just encourage council and staff to just find some common ground with numbers and really just get all the data points out there. And I definitely encourage, I know that the fire district has been very active in communicating their beliefs about urban renewal and their impacts, but inviting maybe some of these other special districts as well to that
I
education.
throw out one other option I want you to consider. Maybe if we think about option 4. Option 4 is annually under levy. So what I would do in that case is to work with Andrea at the county. And so we would assure that what we sent in as the amount of taxes would not cause compression. It's a 1-year.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of along the lines of these two, but I'd like to know more about what is, if we did remove tissue, I'd like to see what that does as numbers. How much is that saving everybody, including the city of Scappoose? It doesn't get us out of compression. When they originally did this, they did not have Cascade Tissues in mind. This wasn't on their plan when they decided it. And like, it seems like it's an easier pull than any other
You believe
properties.
my understanding, they added it and it took the payback from 30 years to 25 years, something like that.
It is
So
mentioned.
they did
you know,
consider it.
And the other taxing authority districts were aware of that.
Yeah, I would like to maybe see what it saves, and then at that time, you could look at annual, number 4, find a number that maybe is close to that, that allows everybody to get under compression. But then, like, how hard is it to get out of this? If after a few years, you want cascade tissues back in,
Back in.
can't put it back in. If you annually under levy in 4 or 5 years, can you change that to
Annual under levy.
lower it or raise it up?
Yeah, and
I mean-
annual under levy, you have to literally do every year, communicate with each district every year.
It does say here, it is a lot more work for staff,
It is.
whereas permanently, then it's there. You can't change it once you do that. I mean, to me, I do like looking at how much money this is saving. Number 2, how much is that costing? How much is it? And see if there's a way that it can be a win-win really for I know it's not going to be a win-win-win for everybody because not everybody will be happy, but is there a way we can do a little better, get under compression and help everybody out? These are homes.
Yeah, so I kind of agree with you, Mr. Mayor. I would not be opposed to this coming back in another work session before we have to move into budgeting. Because I would like to understand, having not been familiar with the establishment of the Urban Renewal District, I want to better understand what the goals and objectives were, right? And I do understand League of Oregon Cities had a session on urban renewal districts at their annual conference last year. And they did explain very clearly, it takes years, right, to build that momentum to really drive some impact across the community. And if we're just at that point, I would not want to, hastily move in any single direction without really understanding what were the goals and objectives. How much is removing cascade tissue going to walk us back from that brink of compression, right? If it's an exercise, it only takes us back a quarter, 25 cents, 30 cents, right? And we're going to end up finding ourselves back very quickly into a compression situation. I'd also want to understand that too.
And I'm thinking maybe even a 2-hour work session early April or, well, where we can really look at some numbers. Schedule it. I don't say we have to stay there for 2 hours, but we're putting an hour here and now we've got to go on and there's still a lot of questions. So you could schedule it at 5 and if you get done at 6, you're done. But we would have a lot of questions before the meeting we'd give to you ahead of time so those you can come with answers.
I can invite Andrea.
And I think
Yeah.
having the assessor here would be terrific because she can answer those other questions about, well, if you take cascade tissue out, what else might cause us to go into compression? Is that going to put a Band-Aid on it or not? And I don't know the answer to that. So she would be really vital to have her here.
Okay.
We would want to do it. We're gonna have to figure a time.
It's fine.
We want to do it as soon as we can.
And an hour is
Not
fine,
available.
but yeah, I'd like to schedule within the next month.
For you guys as well as us, Jeff.
Because now we got a minute. Chief Pritchard, you get it last.
Real
word.
quickly. For the record, the fire district is not opposed to the concept of urban renewal. The fire district is opposed to tax dollars that the voters voted for public safety being used for projects in the urban renewal district.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Are we good at this point? Then we'll try to schedule a meeting again. We'll come with a lot more questions so we can get those all answered and hopefully make a decision before budget so we know where we're going, at least for this year. Everybody good? Thank you. Thanks, Agent Miller. We're gonna adjourn.